Welcome to Level with Emily Reese. This is a conversation with composer Nainita Desai, who has done the music for Sam Barlow's new project, an interactive film game called Immortality. And the music for this game is unique because as a player in the game, you are trying to uncover what happened to a model actor named Marissa Marcel. Now, Marissa appeared in 3 feature films that were never released, and your job as a player is to sift through the footage and figure out what happened to her. So, as you can imagine, the musical possibilities are abundant here, and the direction that Sam Barlow and then, of course, Nainita Desai as the composer took is fascinating. And definitely one of my favorite parts about this conversation was kind of uncovering how those decisions were made. Nainita also has written music for 2 documentaries that recently received nominations for prestigious awards. 14 Peaks Nothing is Impossible was nominated for a Primetime Emmy, and The Reason I Jump, which is about autism, was nominated for a News and Documentary Emmy, that awards ceremony coming up later in the month of September 2022. So we have a chance to briefly talk about those 2 projects and the music in them, which is a pretty neat discussion as well. Please join us on Discord. You'll find a link to the Level with Emily Discord server in the show notes. It doesn't cost anything. Just come and join the conversation about games and music in games and all the things. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll catch all of our latest videos. And if you're able to financially support us on Patreon, that'd be fabulous. You can find us at patreon.com/level. All right, here is Nainita Desai.
Immortality. What is Immortality? So basically, it's a full motion video game that Sam Barlow has developed over the last few years. It's kind of an evolution from his previous games, Her Story and Telling Lies, obviously very different conceptually and story-wise. But I scored Telling Lies, and we had great fun. So I was very privileged that and honoured that Sam asked me to be a part of Immortality. So Marissa Marcel was a film star. She made 3 movies, and none of those movies were ever released. And Marissa Marcel, the actress, disappeared. And so Immortality is a horror interactive film trilogy. And the premise is that you're trying to uncover the mysterious disappearance of Marissa. She was set to become a huge star in the 1970s, but she only ever starred in 3 films that were never publicly released. And to figure out what happened as the player, you're thrown into an editing suite with the old Moviola style editing suite. None of this the digital computer stuff. It's all very analog and old fashioned. And you're sifting through lost footage of those films with collections of footage from 3 movies. One movie is from 1968, another one from 1970, and another one from the late 90s, 1999, I think. And the idea is to make you feel like you're in a film editing suite, sorting through these lost movies, uncovering things, uncovering the mystery, and trying to get to the root of whatever happened to Marissa Marcel.
Yeah,
that's the basic narrative premise of the game.
And I mean, we could talk for ages about the genre itself of this being an interactive film game. But I mean, I feel like that's just a different conversation because your music is so fun in this mindset of there being these 3 different films that you're experiencing, right? So is that kind of then how you approached it from a score standpoint was, okay, I'm going to score these 3 films? Or talk to me a little bit about what your musical direction was.
Well, as always with Sam, we have these huge, deeply philosophical, insightful conversations, and I glean as much as I can from our discussions about, getting to the heart of the story and how we're going to approach the score. And so unlike with Telling Lies, it was very character-based. So I wrote themes for each of the main characters. Here, we didn't do that. We decided, because there are 3 movies, we mulled around several ideas, one of which was, let's do a pastiche or dive into the sound world, the musical genres of those movies. And that would have been a lot of fun. But then the problem is that, the problem that you'd encounter is that because as the player, you're diving in a very non-linear way through all these movies all the time, you'd be switching between styles so much. It would be very, very fragmented.
Sure.
So we decided to write a theme for each of the movies, but there is a philosophical theme that encompasses each movie and that each film represents. And so the idea was to come up with a sound palette that would work across the entire score and would unify everything together, that would be common through all the music, but to write a theme that represented the ideas that we were trying to convey. So the ideas of art and religion and life. And that was really challenging. How do you, it's like saying you're describing someone's entire life, and when they die, you have 150-word eulogy written in the bottom of a newspaper somewhere. And you think, how do you convey the idea, this concept, in one singular piece of music? So that was a challenge, and a fun, really exciting challenge. So I could dive into each theme if you want, and I would give you an idea.
I would love that, because like I said, I just loved the textures and the instrument choices and the evolution of these musical sounds, through these art, religion, life situations. I'd love that. Go ahead. Yes.
So for example, with religion, it's connected to this film called Ambrosia, this fictional film made in 1968, and it's based, and Sam is a great lover of film, and I love film as well. I went to the National Film and Television School, and I've watched a lot of movies, and so our discussions, our common ground is always talking about having film references. I live my life through film. I always, when I'm doing something, I'll think, oh, that's like such and such a movie, or a scene from a movie that I really love. So with religion, it's based on a notorious Gothic novel called The Monk, and it deals with life after death. And the idea that something is purer or more abstract, that lives beyond our physical existence, that transcends everything, and it's infinite, like a pure spiritual existence removed from human suffering. And Sam would give me these crazy analogies, descriptions of how to, think of this when you're composing, and so so it's slightly fantastical. There's a little sprinkling of magic in the music, and there's a sense of the divine, of rapture, of miracle. So that was the theme, religion, and it's like, imagine. How can I describe it? It's very difficult. It's like there's something religious, but not religious. And with Sam and myself, we always want to steer away from convention, from cliches and stereotypes. So with religion, you think, oh, angelic choirs, and I thought, well, let's have a touch of choirs, but in a slightly unconventional way. And with each theme, you're also, as each main theme is playing, you then go into the subverted version of that theme, which is a slightly dark and twisted version, and so that subverted version is where you're really scoring it's about realizing that it's about the underbelly of what's really going on behind the scenes, behind the characters, and then in parallel, I don't want to give any spoilers away here, but in parallel to the main and theme, and which then evolves into the subverted theme. So when you're playing the game and it switches to the subverted, there's an emotional shift in the music where you think, oh, there's something happening here. Maybe I'm diving in and finding something, and so the game mechanic triggers those moments in the subverted theme to play, where you go, I'm digging beneath the surface, the music has become a little bit darker, and so that's quite revealing subconsciously to the player. But alongside the main and theme and the subverted theme, you have this other theme, which is the same main theme, but it's almost alien, and it sounds really contorted and twisted, and technically that was fun to create, where you have these, it's like having if you've watched Stranger Things, and you've got the normal world, and then you've got the upside down. Yeah. And so you go into the upside down world, and you hear this other alien theme, kind of like a supernatural theme that's playing at the same time. And you've got different things going on. So that's the best way that I can describe it. So that's religion.
Yeah.
Life.
And before we go on to life, if we could, I mean, definitely that voice the solo voice in the main religion theme is so poignant, because, you don't hear solo voice really until then. And I thought that was very lovely. And I also felt like the main religion theme was much more consonant than what had come before it. So I'm curious what you think about that.
We used the orchestra, we used strings, and I write in a very sort of we worked with the Budapest Arts Orchestra, who are very familiar with extended string techniques, sort of the textures, the sound that not just the notes, but the sound that the instrument makes is very important to me, just to create the vibe and the atmosphere. So I'm using the choirs, but in a less obvious way. And the analogy, I remember now, the analogy that Sam gave me was, imagine you're staring at a religious painting long enough to feel something of the transcendent pure feelings that it's trying to evoke. You're just sitting in an art gallery, just staring up at the painting, and you're meditating and you're soaking it all in, and the painting is imbuing the atmosphere of this transcendent mystical feeling, and that's the feeling that I had to try to get across musically in that theme. And the subverted theme represents the sadness of the sacred, if you like, the negative aspect of, the main theme. You've got organized religion, it's a good thing, and it's everything's okay. And then you go into the subverted side, which is slightly twisted, and it's like organized religion is not such a good thing, because it's trying to, we're getting into religion here, I don't want to get into religion and politics, stay away from it, but you're inflicting cruelty and control over people, and that's the kind of emotion that I was trying to bring out in the music.
Yeah. And you were going to then go talk about life, and with life and the main theme too, saxophone. Loved the saxophone stuff. So talk to me about being like, I think we need saxophone here, because it's just absolutely perfect.
Yeah, why saxophone? Why saxophone? Well, there is a kind of a madness, a reason to logic to the madness.
Yeah.
I've always, when Sam, these films are kind of have this neo-noir feel about them.
Yeah.
And when Sam told me the film references, that's my only kind of nod to that kind of musical noir genre. I was always a fan of Brian De Palma's Body Double. There's another film, The Eyes of Laura Mars, which has a song by Barbra Streisand in it. That's the reason why I watched that movie, because I was a big Barbra Streisand fan. And Faye Dunaway starred in that film. And it's about a murderer a serial killer who gets into people's. She can see the murders happening. This woman can see the murders happening through the eyes of the murderer as he's about to commit the murders, and it's all very noirish and very set in New York. It's set in the 80s, I think, the 70s, late 70s, and that sort of musical genre, the noir films always had saxophones in them. And I've always looked for an excuse to use the sax in that style. That kind of John Barry's film scores really influenced me when I was growing up, and those sort of black and white noir movies as well. And so there was another movie with Kathleen Turner and cannot remember the American actor's name, but John Barry wrote the score for it, and it's a bit like Basic Instinct. That was another big influence for us for the game, Sharon Stone and Jerry Goldsmith's score, and so very really quite sort of I would not ever say I am plagiarizing those scores, but they were always in my subconscious, and I love the saxophone, and so that's a major reason why I've suggested to Sam, let's use the saxophone here. And with the main theme, we were trying to explain, everything's above the surface, everything seems fine, and then like a David Lynch movie, and Sam is a big David Lynch fan, and so am I, Blue Velvet, and the American dream of the front yard having the white picket fence and the green grass, and then you go, and in David Lynch as well, you go beneath the surface and you see the insects and the nasty side of humanity, and the underbelly of the perfect world. And so that's why the music becomes twisted, and it's sort of subverting things, and it's bringing out the dark side. So those were some of the reasons for when you hear the main theme, it kind of twists and becomes a bit darker and chaotic, and flames are burning, and it's the end of the world.
And I was reminded early on in some of the tracks early on of honestly of like the French composers in the early 1900s who were doing like bitonal and polytonal things where they're, Mio especially, I just was like, God, this reminds me of Mio because of you do have these, oftentimes there are different things going on at the same time that by themselves make perfect sense and together also make sense, but sound a little off. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, a little bit. I mean, I've always, I'm actually not classically trained. In fact, I learned the violin and the piano as a child. But I never took my music studies to a further level. I'm totally pretty much self-taught in that regard. That's wonderful. Yes. So I was always scared of working with the orchestra, and I've always slightly felt a little bit of imposter syndrome, thinking I'm not trained, I can't write for the orchestra, and that fear soon went away when I like throwing myself in the deep end, and I use my ears. I go with my emotional gut instinct, and so here there's no right or wrong. If I'm writing with dissonance and I'm twisting things, if it sounds right to my ear, at the end of the day, I'm trying to get across emotion, and I'm storytelling through music. So I'm encapsulating the essence of the film that we're, in life or art or religion. And so to me, I started off as a sound designer. So it's all sound is music to me. And that's the point I'm trying to make is that, with dissonance and things not sounding correct if I'm composing, and it doesn't sound correct musically, I think, but it sounds okay. It may not look right on the page, but with the notes on the page, and but it's there's something about it that works. And so I try to always push towards this kind of unsettling dissonance where it's wrong, and it's sounding wonky, but at the same time, there's a balance to it, and somehow it works.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that even in these more dissonant moments throughout this entire soundtrack, it still manages to be very beautiful and lovely. You know, it's never ugly to me when you know, and that's I think a challenge to make something crunchy beautiful. You know.
Yeah. And that's always, there's a duality there, and that's something that Sam brings through. That's an important running theme for Sam as well, a kind of a duality to the characters, to the stories, and the concepts of the game. So that's something that I tried to bring across. And you know, I have a degree in mathematics, and I love the beauty of numbers, and that's the way that I approach writing music has been influenced by my love of numbers and equations.
Yeah.
You know, there's a yin and a yang, and there's a push and a pull, so that there's a beauty. You know, I want to create something that has a balance and a beauty to it, but at the same time, it's like chaos and order. You know, I want to allow for a bit of chaos to work with that beautiful balance as well when I'm constructing the piece, and it's very organic and evolves naturally. I don't consciously think about that when I'm writing a piece of music, but it just comes out naturally when I'm sitting at the piano writing. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I saw that you had a maths degree, I wanted to ask you how you think that influences you as a composer, because, you know, whether you're studying medieval music or 20th century atonal, I mean, math is everywhere. And so, you know, I'm curious. I'd love to hear you talk more about that, how you think it does kind of influence your writing.
Well, I wanted to go into architecture. You know, as a teenager, it was like either architecture or music, and it's, you know, you look at fractals and what's the way I've got dreadful memory, but the Fibonacci sequence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's prevalent in all of nature, and that's something that's always fascinated me about the beauty of numbers. Yeah. And the same with music. You know, I mean, people always say music and math go together, and I find it such a cliche when people say that. But I guess there is a truth to that. Mm-hmm. And so I don't like to write music that doesn't have emotion in that sort of, in a very mathematical, in a very technical way. You know, like Bach. You know, I love Bach, but there is an inherent emotion to it that pushes you to feel something. So that's always kind of, you know, the Fibonacci sequence. You know. In an existential way, you know, the beauty of numbers has always influenced me, and in a technical way. I mean, I started off as a sound designer, and I use numbers when I'm working, you know, in soft music software, and everything has to be just so. So that's, but I never let the technicality of math and science and all of that get in the way of it. May form the conceptual underbelly of what I'm composing. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I want to create something that an audience, a listener, will respond to in a very visceral, emotional way, where they can connect with what I'm trying to say. And of course, you know, people will read anything they want to in your music when they hear it. And that's always wonderful when someone comes up to me and says, I listened to such and such a piece, and it just evoked this feeling in me. And I think, and people interpret what they want to interpret. And that's really, really lovely, you know, when that happens.
Yeah. Now, with Telling Lies, you didn't have any visual aids to score that, did you?
No, I had a script, a massive script, and here it was the same thing, because
really, okay,
I'm kind of having to write in reverse. You know, I'm not. I'm tend to be a very visually inspired composer. And you throw visuals at me, and that will inform me in a certain way. And I'm scoring another game at the moment for EA, for Electronic Arts, which is a bit more conventional. It's musically, it's really edgy and different, but the process is quite conventional, which is new to me. Which is wonderful because I'm presented with storyboards and little bits of gameplay and images of the characters and the landscapes and the environment and so on. That's great. With Immortality and Telling Lies, Sam, we're working in reverse. I'm having to create the music first.
Wow.
Without seeing anything at all. And all I'm given is, with Immortality, I've got a 280-page script to wade through. And and lots of conversations with Sam. And written notes, and he's very descriptive. So that it's like reading a book and using your imagination. Mm-hmm. And that's quite often one of the loveliest things, because it's very liberating composing like that. Yeah. It's up to me to interpret it in any way that I want to. And so, but the problem of that is that it's so liberating that I go, I don't know what to do here. I couldn't write 280 minutes of music, for the entire scene. So that's why we created a set of parameters and thought, how can we restrict and convey in a very efficient way the underbelly of the game with music? Mm-hmm. And so we broke it down into these 3 themes. Yeah. And the subverted versions and the supernatural. So I'd have these conversations with Sam, and that would take me down a rabbit hole of exploring music, sharing musical ideas with Sam. He'd send me music that he'd been listening to that would inspire me to feed him more music. And it was quite a sort of a toing and froing process. And what Sam likes to do is that, I'd write the music, I'd do the mock-ups, which is, do everything using the computer before I actually recorded with the orchestra. Mm-hmm. And then he would mull over the music and sit with it and live with it, and then come back to me and say, okay, maybe we can shift this a little bit more like this or more like that. And he would, as he was writing the script or filming, he likes to play the music to the actors as well.
How nice!
That happened on Telling Lies, where he would poor actors, they were sort of given. Sam would give them their themes. So I'll listen to this, just soak up the vibe of it, and this is like your personality. This is your character, cool. And that would help inform. The music that I was writing would help inform Sam's writing, and vice versa. So it was a really, really interesting way of working. And the closest I know that Ennio Morricone, when he scored one of the spaghetti westerns for a few dollars more, I think they were Sergio Leone was on location, and it was in the old-fashioned ways before they had computers. So he described the scene to Ennio Morricone, and he said, "This is what I want," and Ennio Morricone composed the scene, the cue. And then they had these huge loudspeakers on set, on location in Spain where they were filming. And they played Ennio's music, blasted it out on set. And they choreographed the whole scene around his music, wow. Which is why when you watch it, you go, how on earth did he manage to hit all those points? Because they were watching it, and from there to there, I'm walking 10 steps from there to there, and by the time the music reaches that point, I have to have reached that point. So fascinating way of deconstructing cinema, which is what Sam does. He's deconstructing cinema here, and creating a totally new way of telling stories.
Yeah, and so with Telling Lies, or at least with Immortality, it seems like there's quite a bit more music, too, that you wrote.
Yeah, I think it's about double the amount of music. And we're, in terms of the process, I mean, Telling Lies was based on search words, keywords. You type in the word love, for example, and then up would pop up 5 scenes, all containing the word love in the dialogue somewhere. Here we're using a different technique, which goes back to the old days of editing, which is called the match cut. And so if you watch a scene, you'll be triggered by, let's say you're interested, you're watching a scene and there's an object or an image within the scene. If you click on it, it will take you to that image in other scenes within the game, within the footage. So it's like a trigger. It's like this. So let's say you've got a picture of a gorilla, and you click on that picture of a gorilla. It will take you to another scene with the gorilla in it, but it'd be like a branching narrative. It could take you to any of the 3 films. You're spanning 30, 40 years of those 3 lost movies. And the analogy that I can think of is, remember in 2001, the beginning of the film with you're going back in time, thousands of years ago, to the beginnings of man, and with the gorillas hitting the bones on the ground, and the gorilla throws the bone into the air, and you see that bone, and then you go to the spaceship, the space station, which is the same shape as the bone, and you're forwarded, to 2,000 years later, or hundreds of thousands of years later, to the space station. So you've got that analogy, you've got that image of the bone, and it's connected to something totally unrelated. That's the idea of the match cut, where you've got an image that is so you're just clicking on images, and that will then take you to different scenes, and you're piecing the mystery together by watching the different scenes. It's really, really clever, and it sounds complicated, but it isn't. It's so simple, and it's such an elegant idea that that just works beautifully when you're playing it.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the other thematic areas then, because we talked about religion, and then I never really did let you talk about the other 2. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about life. That this is an area where it sounded like I was hearing prepared piano or something. It was, again, something beautiful but slightly off. So talk to me about that.
So life is linked to Minsky, this 1970s New York set thriller, and about the death of a famous artist. And life is about living life in the moment. You're engaging in the physical pleasures of life, and you're capturing that. It covers, it's quite sensual, and the analogy that Sam gave me was, imagine Jesus that lives physically, and he hangs out with real folk drinking wine. Okay, that's the idea. I thought, okay, I need to write a piece of music that conveys that. The music has this sense of abandonment about it, and that's what we were trying to convey. And where we revel in the beauty of life, and we get wrapped up in, hedonistic activities, partying and living life to the full, and that's the idea of it. And then we come to the subverted side of it, where you've got a hangover. So it's like the feeling of having flown too close to the sun and you've missed it. And the theme is a contrast. The subverted aspect of the theme is a contrast between really being in the moment of living life to the full, and then the subverted shifts to you're just going through the motions in a mechanical way, like a hollowed out version. You're doing your 9 to 5 job, being in an office and on front of a computer all day, data inputting, and it's like, this is not living. This is just, well, this not living, you're surviving, you're not living life to the full. And so that's the kind of contrast that I wanted to convey musically within that theme.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And that was quite inspired by the movies of the late 80s and early 90s, like Basic Instinct and Body Double. And you've got these dark orchestral textures, and there's an emptiness to it as well. So that was life. That was life. Yeah.
That was life. And with art, again, there's more piano, but also really lovely harp added to the main theme. So talk to me about the art themes.
Yeah. So art was inspired by this 1999 fictional movie that Sam created called The Two of Everything. And it's about a pop star and her body double, a little bit like the Whitney Houston movie, The Bodyguard.
Yes.
That way, yeah. So it's about creating something that lives on forever. It's art, and what we do as artists, you're writing a book or you're creating music, you're a fine artist, you're trying to create something that lives on forever in other people and has a life of its own. So, like Mozart or Beethoven, after you die, what is your legacy? What is your artistic legacy? What are you leaving behind that has a mark and an imprint on society? And so it's an attempt, musically, it's an attempt to capture or recreate things in a purer form. I'm synthesizing the worlds of religion and life together, and it's like, and one of Sam's analogies is he says, if you think about Picasso painting, you're repainting the same line again and again, and so there's a repetition to the music that comes in, and it's the synchronization between the hand and the brain and the imagination, and the subverted side to that is about trying to achieve artistic perfection, but you can't. Mm-hmm. And you're exhausted. You're reaching your limits, trying to achieve something, and you can never ever get there. And the torture of creating. So when I compose, I actually find it quite a torturous process. So I could really identify with this theme. I was living the theme that I was creating because. It's like the subverted side we're trying to show is the torture of creating art out of the intangible, about you're achieving to create something. I'll spend a day or days trying to come up with the perfect theme, and yet I can't, and yet sometimes it's staring you in the face. But I find composing, I feel that I need to be a tortured soul to compose, and that's what we were trying to convey with the music. So it was quite a fun. I mean, I did enjoy it. I enjoy the process afterwards. Once I've completed it, I think, okay, I think we've got something here.
Yeah. Now, when you're composing, do you sit at the keyboard? How does that usually happen for you?
Yeah, I guess my default mode is to sit in front of my keyboard, but I do like to shake and work with the computer. But I find when I'm coming up with melodies, and quite a lot of the melodies, I do like a strong melody, and it's not very often that I get given the opportunity to do that, because I feel directors tend to want to, in film and TV, I find that directors tend to want to err on the side of being too emotional and being too strong with music. And with games, it's so liberating because you can do that and it's expected of you, and people want strong themes.
Yeah.
So I'll often be out, walking or doing the shopping in the supermarket, and I'll come up with a melody. I find I'm most creative sometimes not being in the studio and just doing something totally different. And so I'll then quickly record melodies into my phone, into my iPhone, my notes and memos and things, and then I'll come back to it the next day and I'll listen back to it and think, if I listen to it the next day and think that's okay, then it's worth pursuing. Otherwise, I'll just abandon it, or I'll sleep. Quite often I dream music, and I'll wake up. I'll go to bed with a musical problem, a bit of a musical conundrum. I think, I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure how to tackle a piece of music, and I'll mull it over before going to sleep, and then I'll sleep on it. And I'll wake up the next morning with an answer.
Nice.
It's it doesn't happen too often, but it happens enough. I think, I'm working while I sleep. Isn't that the best way?
Yes. You found the trick.
I found the solution. But for the game, there was another thing that Sam asked me to do for the game, which I was really excited about, because I guess I'm a 90s baby, a sort of late 80s, 90s baby. So I grew up listening to Britney Spears and, Christina Aguilera and all these 90s sugar-coated pop, and Madonna. I loved Madonna and those sort of strong pop songs. And for the Two of Everything, Sam said, "Can you write a mid-90s pop song?"
Yes.
And it's something that I'd never done before, and so it was a really fun challenge, and it gave me an opportunity to sort of listen to all those tracks that I'd listened to as a young teenager, and but this was a kind of a spoof. This wasn't. It's like inspired by Britney Spears' "Hit Me Baby" and early Madonna hits, and the character sings it. She's a pop star. Marissa is a pop star in the film, so I wrote this pop song and gave it a traditional, full-on early 90s arrangement, and she sings it in the film as well, and did an acoustic version as well, which she performs in the game for one of the scenes. She's rehearsing, she's auditioning, and then you hear the pop song and she's miming to it, and there's a dance routine, and so you'll have to dig into the game to find that scene to hear the song. But Sam gave me these half-written lyrics, and I thought, and I didn't have the heart to say to him, they're not so hot, they're not great. And so I rewrote it. I changed the lyrics and made it work, with the melody, and so that was fun. And I guess Sam should be credited as co-lyric writer on the pop song.
Two of Everything, I think it's called, right?
Two of Everything, and it's it's a bit of a cheesy spoof, of those early pop songs. But it's quite an art to write something really catchy.
Yes.
It's very easy to be dismissive of those of pop music and pop songs, and it's not very often that I get to do it. I'm writing these, the rest of the music is very cerebral and very intellectual and philosophical, and then I'm writing this sort of trashy pop song, and it was one of the hardest things I had to do, actually. Really fun, but it's to write a good melodic, catchy, hooky pop song, is tough. So I'm hoping I can release it as a single, maybe, and it'll reach the top of the charts. I don't know. We'll see if we can do that. Yeah,
it's a fun tune. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to ask you about it. It's catchy, and so is the main theme. I've got the main theme in my head right now through this whole interview, and woke up with it there. So. mission accomplished with the catchiness of the main theme as well. But you mentioned a couple of times that you started off as a sound designer, and I'm curious, what the evolution was from you doing sound design into composition.
Well, I was always, I love sound, and I used to go out recording sound effects, and I had a portable DAT recorder, and I was just
nice.
I loved film and I loved sound. I don't know why, it's just one of those, it just sort of my ears perked up literally when I was watching Barton Fink by the Coen brothers. That was a big influence on me, and sound was very important in the Coen brothers movies. And one of the so I was interested in sound design, and I'd go out and record sounds of nature, and I had my headphones and my microphone and a DAT recorder, and I loved film as well, and so I got a scholarship to go to the National Film and Television School and to study sound design. But as a child, of course, I was really into music as well, and I discovered film scores, film soundtracks, and I played video games as well. The Atari and Space Invaders, and I had a Amstrad PC, and as a teenager, I was really into games, and so the first proper paid work that I actually had, of course, I worked as a sound designer, and I really wanted to get into music, but I didn't know how. And so I created a showreel, and I sent it. I found this directory of all the film, TV companies and games companies as well, and I sent out 100 reels. And I got back a reply from 2 companies, one of which was a video game company. It was a publisher, actually, called Empire Interactive, a really successful games publisher in the UK. And they had 5 or 6 developers that were creating games for them, sort of flight simulators, another game called Sheep for Nintendo, and what else did I do? I mean, various games, Monopoly, World Cup Monopoly, and all sorts of various games that I got to work on. So I'd started off by creating sound effects for video games, and then I said to the developers, well, actually, I do music as well. And so they said, oh, well, we'll try you out. And so one thing led to another. And so I ended up doing sound effects and music for the games.
Okay.
And then what happened was that the publisher got taken over by another company, and I kind of lost that strand of work overnight. I was working as a freelancer regularly for all these games companies, but that sort of fell by the wayside, and I then got offered a job doing a TV project, and then I moved into film and TV. Okay. And it's kind of like full circle. I've been coming back full circle now to my true beginnings, which were video games way back about over 20 years ago, and the industry has changed so much. It's changed and it hasn't changed. The techniques are still there in terms of I'm writing in a modular way, I'm writing in stems and layers, and using those conventional games music techniques to compose, and in terms of implementing it using middleware software and WYs and Fmod and all of that, but it's so it's like my career's come full circle. I've managed to get back into video games, and having built up sort of a history of now writing for film and TV, I feel everything is coming full circle. And I feel that experience of scoring for film and TV and now for games, it's like a convergence of forces of creativity, because I feel that the future of entertainment, I'm a soothsayer now, the future of entertainment is this hybrid form of, that audiences are becoming so much more, they've been so passive, and they're searching for more. They're sort of really the audiences are much more sophisticated. They're demanding more, and I feel that the way that Sam is telling stories is very exciting.
Yeah.
It's the way in which we tell and engage with storytelling it's a really exciting space to be in, and we're taking techniques from filmmaking, such as the match cut that Sam is using in Immortality,
Right.
and we're blending these storytelling techniques with the non-linear aesthetic of gameplay that are keeping you engaged in a fresh, inventive way. But you're watching a movie, but you're not watching a movie.
Right.
You're finding your way. It's like piecing a jigsaw puzzle together and diving into it. And so Sam is kind of setting a precedent in a way where we're working out our own techniques and processes of doing things, and that can be daunting because we're pioneering new ways of telling stories, and that's a really exciting way to work, which is why it was such a challenge when we were devising the techniques for creating the music for this game. I can't write the music for 3 feature films here that Sam has made.
Right.
It's just we don't have the time and the resources to do it. So that was really it was fun.
I think it elevates all of the genres it comes from. Like, to have this interactive movie, this new way of storytelling, makes movies better. It makes games better. It's a really neat, exciting thing to witness.
Yeah, it is, and of course you don't know whether people are going to engage with it in the way that you want them to.
Right.
It's so I think you just don't know how people are going to respond to it, and you're going out on a limb. And I think, it's a quote David Bowie, I think you do your most exciting work when you're in a swimming pool and your feet aren't quite touching the ground because you're slightly floundering but you're not quite drowning either. So you think you're pushing yourself and let's try something new and different and edgy but we're still using old techniques as well. It's sort of, you're mixing the old and the new, and so using the orchestra was sort of, it's familiar territory. I wanted to use a string section, I wanted to use the clarinet and the saxophone, and use these the choirs, and use these sort of sounds that we're used to hearing within our sonic landscape that have been around for hundreds of years with the orchestra, but throw a spin on it. And I use extended techniques and just sort of mix it in a different way, and it's so quite edgy and bold and hopefully sounds fresh.
It does. I have enjoyed listening to it very, very much, and I'm aware of the time, and I want to respect your time, but I also want to make sure that we mention these nominations that you have coming up. And it's possible this might publish after it happens, but I still want to just, you mentioned how you used to have imposter syndrome. I'm glad you don't anymore, because it's very clear that you've managed to do some amazing scores in your time with film and TV and games. And so do you want to talk a little bit about the couple of projects that you're nominated for right now, and before we say goodbye?
Sure, Emily. 14 Peaks, Nothing is Impossible has been nominated for a Primetime Emmy, and for Best Documentary Feature. It's a feature documentary out on Netflix, and it's about a man, Nims Purger, who climbs 14 of the world's highest mountains in less than 7 months, breaking
Amazing.
all world records. He's incredibly inspiring, and for me, I worked with the London Contemporary Orchestra, who I worked with on Telling Lies, and nice. I love their experimental way of doing things, and we certainly use that in the score for that. So it's I've never done this before, but it was in this way, but it was a huge symphonic, big, epic score. And but also quite emotional. So we're going between the mountains, which are, it's a hostile environment. It's an amazing landscape, the Himalayas. The cinematography is incredible. And so how do we match that with the music? We create this big sound that's a foreboding sound that has a darkness to it. There's a lot of tension and drama and thrills and excitement. You're taken on an emotional roller coaster with that score. But what makes this character tick? What's the heart of the film? Why does he do these crazy things like climb up, the 8,000ers? It's because of this bond, this relationship that he has with his mother. And so there's a piece of music that I wrote called Mother and Son for him and their beautiful bond. And it comes down to the singular sound, which is beautiful solo violin. So you're going from epic to this simple sort of simplicity of the simple emotion. And I also wanted to bring out, because of the cultural side of the Sherpas who've never been acknowledged for their work, supporting Western climbers going up the mountains, and finally they get a little bit of recognition. So I brought in smatterings, touches of Nepalese plucked stringed instruments. I've got, one of them, the Kemench violin behind me, and I've got a collection of world music instruments. And I, as well as sound design, I also worked for Peter Gabriel as his assistant music engineer, and I have a background in world music as well. So it's bringing all those sort of the Western universal themes of Western music, universal emotions, and bringing it to these sort of Nepalese touches as well, and getting that across. And then the other project is The Reason I Jump, which was a very beautiful film. It's visually stunning. It's based on a book called The Reason I Jump, and that's been nominated for the News and Documentary Emmy, and it's a feature doc. It's out on Netflix in the US and on Disney Plus everywhere else, I think. And it's based on a book called The Reason I Jump, written by a 12-year-old Japanese boy, Naoki Higashida, who is nonverbal autistic himself. And he tried to explain to the world in 53 questions in this book of what it feels like to be autistic from his perspective. And so the film is a kind of a variation of that, tries to tell you that through the film. And there are 5 contributors who are all nonverbal autistic, young teenagers living in different parts of the world. And it tells you, they explain what it's like to be autistic through their eyes and ears. And it's multisensory, and I love doing research in the projects that I work on. So I dived into the world of autism and read a lot of papers and scientific papers, and watched movies and read books, and tried to understand and translate all the different aspects of autism into music in the film. So the characters are nonverbal, and so I wanted to give the characters a voice. So I used the human voice, and I recorded my own voice singing and layering it and treating it and manipulating it. And another thing is, the characters rock. One of the characters, autistic characters, she rocks backwards and forwards, and the repetition is also quite prevalent in a lot of neurodivergent people. And so circular motion, repetition, rocking backwards and forwards, those kinds of visual metaphors and ideas found themselves into the score. So I'd use repetition music that would repeat itself, sort of loops, and that sort of rocking backwards and forwards idea, going round and round in circles. She rocks back and forwards because it's a very cathartic feeling. It's a feeling of emotional release. And also sound design. Sound is very, when autistic people perceive the world, sound is very heightened for them. It's very multisensory. So I would be given sound effects from location, from the scenes in the film, that I would then treat and manipulate into, that became pieces of music. So it starts off as sound design, and then it evolves into a musical piece, which was, so there's a ceiling fan in one of the scenes in the film, and they gave me the sound of this fan going round and round. And I had quite a few of them, and you've got these repetitive sounds all sort of interweaving together. And so I took the sounds of the ceiling fan and I chopped it all up and in my software, and then I created musical loops out of them, and it becomes this euphoric, cathartic release of emotion when you hear these loops, and just builds to this emotional, big musical climax. And so check it out if you can, or check out the score. It was really a very, and with many of my projects I work on, it's very, for me, I learn about the human condition, and I learn about myself, and I love to dive into those sort of projects, and it transforms me. I find film and games and TV as a very transformative medium to work in. It confounds my expectations of the world that I live in, and I learn something about the world. Every project I do, I learn something new and different about music or about the world that we live in, and the characters, and how we see. So I've always seen the world through cinema. It's always taught me something about the world.
And probably unexpected things as well. Like, did you have any idea you would learn about a man who climbed 14 peaks in 7 months or whatever? Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the things that you get to learn about.
Yes, yeah. The one thing I learned about working on 14 peaks is that I never want to climb up a mountain. Because it's the amazing thing about 14 peaks is that we all have the analogy of achieving something that's deemed to be impossible, and anything is possible if you set your mind to it. So it's incredibly inspiring and motivational in that regard. It's like, we all have our own personal mountains to climb in our everyday worlds, in our lives every day. And so, watching that film, even though you're not going to physically climb up Mount Everest like Nims does, you can connect with it and relate to it in your own small everyday world. And it's an amazing film to have been a part of, and it was a huge challenge. We recorded the score at Abbey Road. Nice. It was recorded during the pandemic, so that had its own technical challenges, because we were it was the biggest recording session since lockdown had happened.
Okay.
We had, a massive string section. Everyone had to be socially distanced, and it created a different. Because we were socially distanced, there was literally, physically, there was more air in the room, and it created an airy ambience when we were mixing the score. It gave the sound of the score a slightly different. Of course, it's big and epic and dramatic and huge, but it gave the score a feeling of more air. And also, I used silence in the score as well. You don't have to fill up the film with wall-to-wall music. We use the crunch of the feet on the ice and the snow, and you're just relishing those details. You've got this massive landscape, and then you hear the detail of the wind whistling through the mountains, and the crunch of the footsteps on the snow, and that's all part of the storytelling and the immersive experience of how we experience the music and the sound and the footage. All has its part to play in putting you into the world of this daunting task and this daunting landscape that you're thrown into.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, what more do you want to say about anything, but especially Immortality, since that's right around the corner and will be out by the time this is ready. But yeah, what more would you like to say?
I'm just excited about it. I'm really excited to hear how audiences, gamers, are going to connect with the stories in this game. The three films and the journey that they're going to go on, and just having fun playing the non-linear aspects of these movies. Just having fun diving into Marissa's world. I can't give any. I don't want to give anything more away, to be honest, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion about the character afterwards. I mean, the key word is immortality, and that's going to unlock a lot of things instantly. So it's cool. Marissa is a really cool character, and you're going to discover a lot about her, and so. I can't say more than that, really. It's incredibly ambitious. It's much more ambitious than Telling Lies. We're sort of going onto the next level here, and Sam has really pushed the boat out. I've worked. It's very rare that I get to work with someone as bright and intelligent as someone as Sam, in terms of in a very holistic way. He's quite visionary, and so I'm sort of riding along his coattails on this one. It's we're breaking boundaries, and we're telling a story in a way that's never been told before, and you're learning about film, and it's Sam's love and my love. It's the culmination of my entire career background, my love of sound design, my love of film, my beginnings in video games. And so it's like all these converging forces have come together, with noir film music. And, I really got to, create something that I've always wanted to, never had the opportunity to, but create something musically that I've always wanted to write in this style. And Sam allowed me to do that.
It is very beautiful, lovely, entertaining, thought-provoking music, and it's been absolutely a pleasure to listen to it. And I look forward to playing the game, and I absolutely look forward to hearing whatever you've got coming up next. So thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute delight talking to you.